Hi, I'm Matt from Merca Technologies, and today we have a short tachometer cable we're going to fix today. So this cable came in from a customer. It's about, 4-ish feet long. And what it has here on this end is something called a compensating tip. Now, a compensating tip allows you to switch out the bottom end tip size as you see fit, kind of thing. Say you need a 187 or you want a 203, sometimes you need a 104. In this case, it's just a straight 187. There's no there's no need to change it on a constant basis in this respect, because it's just a permanent hookup. And as you can see, it's got a little bit of damage for sure. So it's been bent actually quite a lot at the ferrule end here. So I wonder if it's being given too hard of a turn out of where it's being connected into. We'll see. And then on the other end, we have a push-on style. So this push-on style will have a 104 square in there to go into the Tach or speedometer. This is a Tach actually. So this is going to go into the Tach. So this has no kind of a mounting system on it. It's just like a straight cylinder. And the actual clip is going to be on the gauge end itself. So when you push it in, it'll hook on to the end of the ferrule, and then it'll stay put that way. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this started and make a new one. Okay, so upon digging around with the parts and whatnot, I decided to change the approach a little bit. We're going to keep the compensating tip because his existing one is bent. So I also noted in there for the customer he needs something exact, so we're going to build him as exact as possible. So what we got here is a brand new compensating tip in a 187 configuration that is not bent. We're going to use a compensating ferrule. Now how that works is this pops in like that, doesn't come out, and then you make the connection internally with a 124 square, which is this tip we're going to use here to make it rotate. Got our 7/8 nut on that end. Now on the gauge end, because they only make this, we only make this to fit 330 cable, and this has to be stepped up to a 445, we need to use this piece here. What it does is crimp onto this end, and then that allows us to crimp onto a larger diameter cable. And then we have our 104 square tip we're going to put in, so it comes out on this end. So, let's get started. So we got both of our ends cut, got them all nice and cleaned up. Now it's time to put our casing on. Remember to always put the nut on first, like always. Cinch on our ferrule. Always give it a good tug. And that side's done. So for this side, what we're going to do is make this assembly first, and then we'll crimp it onto this side. Make sure it's nice and snug there. There you go. Grab the other end of our cable. That rubber off there. Slide that on. And then crimp it on. And there you go. So what we're going to do is slide this tip in just so we don't lose it, and that way we can start working on the inner core. So the inner core here is going to be the 150 we talked about earlier. Going to give us some length until we feel no resistance, which shows it has bottomed out on the other side. And there we have it. Gonna give ourselves a little room to work with. Pull it out. And the first thing we'll do is put our bottom connection with the compensating ferrule on first, because that way when it comes out the gauge end we can trim it up accordingly, and then that way we have about as minimal product waste as you can. There's still going to be a smidgen, but you know, what can you do? Feed that all the way in. Now, if it goes in the right angle, it'll just slide in. You'll feel it if it doesn't, and otherwise, you just turn it and it'll bottom out there. And then we know if we got it a good connection. I'm just holding the other end up in the air right now, just making sure everything's working. So right now it's not in. So as I push it down to try and fit the tip in there, there we go. I don't know how easily you can see that. It's also a little hard to twist this thing with gloves on. But at least that way we know we've made a good connection, and now we can start working on the other side. Okay, so this is entirely too long. We need to also put this tip on, so we need to trim up a fair bit, an inch or two, because you do not want this tip flush with the end of the ferrule here. You want it recessed a little bit, because the end of the cable is going to push into needs to have the right clearance, so you don't want it bottoming out. And by that I mean, if the inner core is too long and it's forcing itself in when you're pushing the cable in, what's going to happen is the inner core here is going to start binding and twisting too much within the casing itself, and that leads to premature wear. And sometimes what happens with that is, under high revolutions, it'll catch on something and it'll just destroy itself, because one side's going to catch and stay still, and the other side's going to want to keep going, and that's not good for the cable. And I can't even tell you how many times I've seen cables just completely destroyed like that. And the next time we get one in, I'll definitely show you guys what it looks like. But let's get this going here. So what we're going to do is get that down to about here. Okay, so we can see how much we need to cut off just to get to the tip length, but the tip is also going to go way up here. So what we really need to do is cut down to about here. But can't always do that by eyeballing it, so what I do is clip off a little bit, put the tip on, kind of push it in. Still way too long, of course. Test it again. And that is, it's a smidgen too long. So what we're going to do is trim a little bit off that a little more. Put that on. I kind of twist it to get it in the bottom so I know it fits on the other side. And that's more like what we want. So what I'll do here, make sure that tip is bottomed out. Get my crimpers. Put that on, give it a nice tug. Push it in, twist it a little bit so it gets on the other side. And voila, and that's that. Now the next step is to grease it, and then we are done. Now we're going to get a generous amount of this grease. Like I said before, this is an airline type grease. And because this is going into a compensating ferrule, we do want to kind of grease the end up a bit. Slide it in that way. Make sure you coat the inner core completely so it gets nice adhesion, nice coverage rather. Now what I don't do on this end is I do not grease the tip on this side. It's going into the gauge, the less likely it is to slip, the better. Feeling some resistance there because cable needs to twist a little bit to slide into that compensating tip. I wish I could kind of describe to you what it is, but it's kind of a feel. There you go. Yeah, so because the tip on the other side has to slide into another area on the compensating tip, sometimes when you're putting them in, it just doesn't slide in properly. You have to twist it so it works properly. And here I'll try to give you a little better show of this. So we got the tip there for the gauge end and the compensating tip on that end. So what we're going to do is just turn it. You can see it's turning, so that way we know we've made a good solid connection. And now this cable's done, and we will work on the next one whenever it comes in along to the bench. So yeah, any questions, leave us a comment below. Otherwise, take care until the next one.